Call the meeting to order. The South Burlington School Board. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I want to recognize that we have a new student rep joining us tonight. Isaiah, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Any comments from the public for any items not on the agenda? Excellent. Do we have any amendments to the agenda for this evening?
We do. We have to add or amend the agenda to add a leave of absence, a .8 FTE special educator at Chamberlain. And the name is Glenn Patterson, under leave of absence.
What was the name again?
Glenn Patterson.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other amendments to the agenda? All right. Then we'll get right into the student representative.
So we have announcements. First, I know Nirali and Isaiah, they maybe want to say a few words about some other things that are happening. Not that there's much probably, but we know there's a lot going on at the high school and otherwise. Just on announcements, Mr. Chair, is to talk a little bit about, we have the upcoming Master Planning and Visioning on May 24th at Orchard School. This is a continuation, the 6:30 to 8:30. Again, that's at Orchard School. Congratulations to Sheila Burley. She was recently honored for Excellence on Education Foundation at a luncheon. Again, she has transitioned from our head varsity girls basketball coach and is leaving that post, but she was congratulated. Also congratulating Denise Aloza, who is the first athletic trainer to be inducted into the Vermont Principals Association Hall of Fame. Those of you who perhaps may see her, again, she's been instrumental to our district in ensuring that safety is paramount on our athletic fields and activities, and has been a spokesperson for many in the state and New England around concussions and other relevant related matters. I also wanted to let you know I've received information from John Stavinsky, I'm not saying that quite right, on the homeless shelter, which is planned to open in the end of June. They're currently in the phase of they'll begin training volunteers. So I just wanted to let you know that that's as of this morning I got that information. Other things on the calendar, there's a lot going on, only a few things that I'll mention, but a lot of activity going on. Step Up Day, actually we have a situation going on right now at the high school, welcoming all of our new students who are going to be transitioning to the high school. So there's an event going on today. And June 9th, again, we're approaching the June 10th graduation, senior family graduation event. That's June 9th, 5:30 to 8. And then graduation happens 10 o'clock, St. Michael's. I'm sure there's a whole lot of other things, but let Isaiah and Nirali add other things.
So next Monday is Freshman Community Service Day, which is always a really exciting day at our school. And a sports award night is next Thursday at the high school at 7 p.m.
So this week was the last full week of school, and also prom is this weekend on Saturday. Yep, I think that's all that's really going on this week.
That's it, huh?
Yeah.
Just prom?
I'll quote you on that, Isaiah.
Last week of school and prom. That sounds pretty good. Well, Isaiah, thanks again for joining us. Looking forward to working with you the end of this year and through next year.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll talk about Nirali next time. Because you're going to join us next time for our last meeting, correct? Before you're off to your new adventures? All right, great. Thank you both. All right. That moves us on, unless anybody has any questions for our student reps. Awesome. That moves us on to the legislative update, and we do have a couple of our legislators with us tonight. We'd like to give them some time to provide some updates about anything that's going on in Montpelier, that did go on in Montpelier, that's related to our education and other areas that are applicable to our community. So I invite you to speak if you'd like.
Sure, from here.
You can.
You here, or can you pick him up on the mic?
Wherever you're comfortable.
Wherever you're comfortable, absolutely.
Wherever you want. Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Representative Ann Pugh, and I chair the House Human Services Committee. I'm the representative for 7-2. While lots of things did happen, I want to say in terms of the world that I work in terms of human services, the issues that are perhaps most relevant to the school is the mandated reporting for child abuse and neglect. And last year, many of you may have known that we made some changes to clarify that mandated reporters had a duty to report and not to necessarily give that responsibility to someone else. Upon making those changes, we heard this year that was creating some concerns around both in schools and actually in hospitals when multiple people were the recipients of the same information. The House, and working with Representative Lalonde, as opposed to School Board Member Lalonde, because he is in House Judiciary, the House made some changes in that law to try to make it clear that if you all had the same information and didn't have anything new to add, that all of you did not have to report it. Unfortunately, the Senate did not agree with our proposal, and they wanted to keep the law as is and put into place rather a process of, if in fact you were then, did not make a report and were called on it for not making a report, you could use what in legal terms is an affirmative defense and say that is why. The House did not think that that was going to make a difference. So the long and short of it is that the law, as we changed it last year, is still in effect. We were not able to address the concerns of the school. We'll look at it this summer. I'm also chair of the Child Protection Oversight Committee that will meet monthly during the summer, so we will try to see if there is a way that we can either clarify through training or whether we need to do some different changes in law to not make it overly burdensome but continue to protect children. The Education Committee looked at issues of special education and began to look at the fact that schools are oftentimes the center for human services and how to both balance both the payment of it and what is the role of a school. And I want to say those are still ongoing discussions, and they're things that I personally would feel it's very important, and your input in terms of how it's working or not working. I know that the South Burlington Schools contracts with Howard to have a school social worker, as well as you have other non-teachers to deal with the multiple issues that students come with. Finally, perhaps less directly related to the school, but in particular, but we made some changes around opiate abuse and trying to ensure that treatment is available by funding some more sites and by trying to also do some prevention and funding some initiatives in terms of on the lines of tobacco control and the very effective messaging that has been gone on to try to do that for prescriptions and for opiate use and abuse. And finally, I guess one more thing when thinking about schools and kids, the FDA, you may have heard, has just done advisory rulings around e-cigarettes and vaping. The legislature and the governor has signed a law that defines e-cigarettes both those things that are like vaping, as well as the things that look like cigarettes, as a tobacco product. And so all of the laws around where you can smoke or not smoke. So all of the, like you can't smoke in schools, you can't, cigarettes have to be behind the counter or in a locked facility, all those kinds of things will now also apply to e-cigarettes. So I think those are the 3 areas that most relate to the school from my world. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity in asking us.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Is it okay if I stand up?
Sure, whatever works.
Challenged. I serve on House Government Operations. I'm Maida Townsend, and I represent District 7-4 here in the city. And in House Government Operations, we were involved in some changes in law that are related to the business of the school district. One large area in which there's been a change in law relates to voter registration. Already in place prior to town meeting day, the Secretary of State had succeeded in having quite operational on the website for the Secretary of State here in state voter registration, so that a person could register online from home anytime, day or night, or from any other site. But there was no need to fill out a paper and that sort of thing. It could be done online, still can be. There were a couple of little hiccups here and there, but in large part, everything has been working very smoothly with the online registration. This last session, we added to that the whole notion of what's called automatic voter registration, such that as of July 2017, that's when this particular piece will go into effect, July 2017, when an individual either applies for or renews a driver's license at the DMV, unless he or she checks a box to opt out of being registered, that person will automatically be registered. And his or her information will be sent to the Secretary of State's office so long as the individual did not check the box to opt out of being registered and also did check that he or she is a U.S. citizen. You cannot register to vote unless you are a U.S. citizen. So, as I said, this will not go into effect until July 2017 because we need to make sure that everything is as it needs to be at the DMV, that all of their forms have been adjusted for the automatic registration with the opt-out box as opposed to opting in. That's the situation right now. You have to opt in at the DMV. So we also need to check and double-check that all of the technology is working smoothly, and both the DMV and the Secretary of State's office feel pretty confident, darn confident actually, that that will be the case by the time we get to July of 2017. Also in that same bill, there is a study which the Secretary of State should have underway as we speak. It was to start immediately upon passage. And the results of this study are due to the legislature, to the House and Senate Government Operations Committees by January. And in this study, he's going to be examining ways in which to register young people who are 16 years of age, because folks go to apply for their driver's license at this tender age, how to go about registering 16-year-olds at the DMV if they will be 18 on or before the next general election. And so that report is due back, as I said, by the beginning of the next session. And we'll see how that can be handled, if it can be handled at all. It's one of those special situations that needs special attention. And also built into that same piece of legislation going into effect January of 2017 is a piece that will allow the entering into the tabulators the early voting ballots. If the Board of Civil Authority in any community votes that that's what they want to do, to be able to put the early voting ballots in the day before Election Day, as opposed to having people wait to enter the ballots into the tabulator on Election Day per se. In other words, trying to pull back on the work that a finite number of hands has to do on Election Day. If a Board of Civil Authority decides that they do want to allow for the tabulator to be fed the early voting ballots the day before Election Day, then it has to be noticed publicly at least 30 days, not more than 40, 45 days in advance, so that everyone's aware of what's going on. And there are witnesses, nobody does it in secret, and all of this, all of the safeguards for the validity of the ballots is written into the law. So there's that piece, the automatic voter registration. There are, the other piece related to registration actually happened during the first year of the biennium, and that was what's known as the same-day voter registration, such that in 2017, that law does not take effect until January of 2017. On Election Day itself, people could register and right then and there vote. What we've been trying to do, and the reason it was put off till 2017, even though the law was passed last year, it's to help encourage folks to get registered and not leave it to the last minute, so that theoretically there wouldn't be more than like a handful coming in wanting to register on actual Election Day. Okay, so there's that. The other thing I thought might be of interest, if you have a moment, is that okay?
Yeah.
We made changes in the open meeting law also. And here we are at an open meeting. And that's yet another of the issues that we deal with in government operations. The changes that we made in the 2014 law, when we made pretty substantial changes in 2014, the changes we made this past year involved, on the one hand, the definition of days. In the 2014 law, there were some references to days with no descriptor. Then there were business days, and then there were calendar days. And local municipalities let us know in no uncertain terms that this was getting people confused. Henceforward, it's all calendar days. Now, some people are mad that it's calendar days because they wanted business days, but other people wanted calendar days. No. In any case, the law was passed with calendar days. Everything is defined as calendar days. Any noticing, any of that business, any part of the open meeting law. Another piece of the changes pertains to meetings of public bodies when some members of the bodies are at an auxiliary site and they're participating via Skype or telephoning in, whatever. Again, municipalities told us they needed some pulling back on detail. So, as an example, if there needs to be a vote taken, when you have some members of the public body off-site participating through electronic means, there does not have to be, as was stated in the 2014 law, there no longer needs to be a roll call for every single vote. If it's clear that it's just a pro forma vote, it's everybody through whatever means, wherever they are, can simply say yes or no, so long as it does end up being unanimous. Okay, if it's not unanimous, then it has to be a roll call. But for instance, to approve the minutes or something pro forma, it doesn't have to be a roll call. In the original law, 2014 version, everything had to be by roll call, waste of time. Another change is that it used to be for those kinds of meetings that there had to be an announcement as well as a posting of the agenda. We did away with the announcement. Everything is covered with the posting of the agenda in the same time frame as previously. And also, we clarified that minutes from these kinds of meetings have to be kept on a website if a community does have a website for the municipality, that the minutes need to stay on for at least a year. You can swap out finalized minutes, for draft minutes, that's okay. But when all is said and done, minutes for all the public meetings must stay on the websites for at least a year. And the other change, which was to clarify things for municipalities, pertains to if there's a complaint that a meeting was not held properly, and a public body needs to cure their violation of the open meeting law, we clarified, instead of leaving general language, we clarified that the public body must cure the violation at an open meeting by either ratifying or declaring as void any action taken at or resulting from three specific violations. A meeting that was not noticed in accordance with the law, a meeting that a person or the public was wrongfully excluded from attending, or an executive session or portion thereof not authorized under the law. Okay. So I'm
Okay.
open to questions, as I'm sure Representative Pugh is too.
Yeah, and I'm going to see if Martin has anything he'd like to add before we open it up for questions.
Just to add a couple, the governor did sign into law a bill that forgives having to pay back construction loans up until 2020. So if a school is sold and that school had used construction loans from the state, there was an obligation to pay a portion of that money back. That is not the case for the next 4 years. The other is the yield bill, which is, as my understanding, does not change, and John can correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't change from when you showed us the update after the House passed it. Essentially, the important parts for our budget are the same as
Same, that's
what
right.
we looked at about a month ago.
A month ago, that's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's it.
Any comments or questions from the public at this time? Of any of the representatives? From the board? I would just have one of all three of you. Is there anything in particular that you would expect that the public or the board should be especially interested in watching next year?
Lord only knows as far as
Putting you on the spot.
there are going to be a great many changes going into the next session, if only for starters in terms of personnel.
Right.
I don't know, Ann, if you know definitely of issues that are going to be coming.
Other communities, Act 46
Mm-hmm.
continues to be a discussion, and with some communities liking it and some communities not. So I don't know how that, with a new group of people, how that might change or not change. Funding of education is an ongoing yearly discussion, and when we think we have the answer, then someone tells us we don't, and we keep looking at it.
And I'll just pause for a second. We just received updates from all of our representatives, and then Helen just joined us.
Hi, Helen.
Would you like an opportunity to share anything about this last session? I know you just walked in. I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. My apologies for being late.
That's fine.
I've never seen parking so difficult here.
A lot of activities going on.
Yes,
That's right.
that's great. As most folks know, I chair the General Housing and Military Affairs Committee in the House. And there was very little that we did this year that was directly related to education. One fairly minor bill that has to do with the Vermont Labor Relations Board and grievance decisions, in which parties can request that their names be redacted from decisions that are posted on the board's website if they've been exonerated. And that came at the request of someone who's had difficult time finding a job following a decision, because his name was spread all over social media. And so the committee did decide, and the body decided to support us in making that request. So that can be done. While we didn't really focus on education per se, though, there were decisions that came down that directly affect, in a really positive way, I think, families in the district. We passed a paid sick day bill which will allow Vermont workers to have up to 3 days of paid sick days starting in 2017 as a minimum floor. That would be important for workers as well as family members who are sick, and would create the possibility that some students who now go to school sick would be able to stay home with the support of a parent, particularly important for low-wage workers. We also passed a bill related to criminal history. We had some amazing testimony from a number of people, including Rich Cassidy, in support of this bill, which would ban the box on initial employment applications. According to Rich, there are approximately 100,000 Vermonters who have some kind of criminal history. And if they are asked to report on initial job application whether that history exists, odds are that job application is going to end up in the circular file. So by banning the box on the initial application, the prospective employee has much greater odds of getting to an interview where they can talk about their history and talk about their willingness and availability to work at that point, making it more possible for them to get a job. So those are two really important pieces. One other one I'll mention briefly has to do with housing. I know we've had students in the district who've been homeless, and in the past that's meant occupying motels on Shelburne or Williston Road. And increasingly the state is moving away from those unsupervised motel settings toward more structured, supported shelters. And we've been very successful at that in Chittenden County. It's not the solution we'd like to see for families. We want to see more permanent housing, and in fact, we supported the Vermont Housing Conservation Board and other funding to create more permanent housing for people. And that was a tough thing to do in a very tough budget year. But we're making progress.
Thank you. Question back here?
On the removing the checking of the box on the initial application, but at some point in the process, is the question asked?
The process, yes, the question can be asked. The question can be asked on an initial application if the employer is subject to state or federal laws that prohibit hiring based on specific offenses and convictions. But those questions have to be targeted to those particular instances. And background checks can still take place. So it's not a panacea, but I think it creates a better opportunity for people who need a second chance.
Any other questions from the public or the board? If not, I would just say on behalf of all of us, thank you very much for your service and your hard work. It's really appreciated. All right. All right. That moves us into the city and school and collaboration discussion. I think this will be relatively quick. This is usually where we talk about the collaboration conversations that David and I had with Kevin and Helen. The last one we had was on April 22nd, so we haven't had one since the last time we met as a board, so we've already discussed that. So we're meeting again on the 27th, so we'll provide an update after that. Do you have anything that you want to offer to this one?
No, just that, that continues to be an important component of collaboration. There's often things that are going on. There's certainly other things that we can talk about. We basically devote an hour to talking about school and city-related matters and try to pay attention to those. This is a continuation from what Elizabeth and I started actually quite some time ago. So I think it does, really support that collaboration. So.
Thank you. All right. Let's move right along to the superintendent's report.
So I'm going to reverse this a little bit. I want to make sure that other people that are at 7:45, where I think we're going to still be a little bit early, but I want to be sensitive to that. So I'll go, nor do I want to delay either, but I want to make sure we're sensitive to our time schedule. So let me just kind of reverse this. I'll give you an update on school safety, campus security, and then parent-teacher communication, and then staffing needs. Okay? So, again, at your request, there was some questions around campus security and safety. I did a very brief write-up here about what we currently do and how we manage and ensure, to the best of our ability, the safety of our students and staff and community. I think important to note that in Monitoring Report 2.2 will be coming up, and that will be much more detailed with the kind of the number of infractions and things that we've seen as a result of that. I guess just a quick highlight is that, we have been one district that's had teams in every one of our schools, which is part of, coming together and talking about are there things that are physical related matters that could jeopardize the safety of students, up to including individuals that may come into our system or by our schools and, possibly commit harm. And so while I won't go into great detail around what our responses are, I think it's important for you to know that in every location we have protocols and procedures, and we don't just have them. We actually exercise that. We don't, at the elementary level, we don't do a lot with going through an actual simulated exercise. We want to be sensitive to the developmental assets of our children, but we do go through an exercise with the crisis team members, and we go through what we call, some tabletop exercises. And we just did one, where did we just do one? Was that at? That was at high school, thank you, right. So we generally read a scenario. We give a very short period of time for response. It's quiet. Sometimes there may be an opportunity to say, you, and you are not here. And what are you going to do? We give a very, very brief pause. We talk a lot about the resources and tools that are available to our staff, and we work at it. And again, I think that's really, really important around what we call kind of brain training in the event that you need to respond. And so
I just want to confirm, so that tabletop test, if it's similar to the ones that I'm familiar with, is there really is not a prep time before that meeting. You present the scenario at the meeting, and it's really a test to see if people are prepared if these things happen. They don't give them time to check.
Could be an environmental issue, could be something turns over right at your street, there could be other related issues. But again, we have worked hard to try to help all of our crisis teams and the associated staff of those schools to know, what are some things that you can do in the event of. And then I think there's a fair amount of activity that goes on with our students around whether it's an announcement that directs them appropriately to do what they need to do. It's an awful thing to talk about. We don't particularly enjoy it, but that's not what we're here for. We're really here to safeguard our precious students and staff who are teaching them. So we are watched currently right now. There's a lot of folks in the state that are watching what we're doing. We post up our activities. We do have a website that's secured to our crisis team, so you can't just get on and look at it. But we keep those scenarios available and allow the teams to add others to them. There's no website or site where we go to get them. We try to do some things that are relevant to what might be or what could go on. Again, I cited some environmental related matters, but it could go up to and including, those very, very severe and concerning issues. What we know is that not everyone will be able to respond, even if you go through the brain training, but what we try to do is really make sure that there's, a collective group of folks that know what they can do. And we're a very fortunate district on behalf of our community that we have tools and resources very able to deploy. So I'm happy to answer questions.
I have just something I want to bring up. It's interesting when you're in a crisis. There are commands, there's some actions that need to be taken, and boy, people, the idea of someone on the loudspeaker saying we need to shut the doors, whatever. And so the crisis committee came up with these cards. We have an ID that allows us to come in, and then what to do in the event of a crisis, the all clear the halls, that kind of thing. So everyone should have that with them at all times, every employee. And I thought that was great. I don't know which committee came up with that, but it's.
And the school board is going to get that too, because you're an important. Some of them spend a
they're in
pretty
the
considerable amount
process
of
of being
time, and
distributed.
you should do that as well. So we know there's areas that we need to continue to reach.
I have one question, not necessarily about, a full-blown test, but are we monitoring sort of basic safety things like having someone at the front desk? Because I had an experience where just a couple weeks ago, I walked into one of our schools behind another mom, who was coming out. She held the door for me politely because I looked like a mom. I didn't have to use my school ID. And then there was no one at the desk. And I was kind of standing there for a good 5 minutes, wandering around looking for someone. And I was just a little concerned that, at an elementary school, that's kind of the first person who's going to notice a problem is someone sitting at that front desk when someone comes through the door.
It's a good point. I mean,
Do we have
typically-
something that we monitor regularly?
Well,
in
we,
those
we, we do ask that we have door coverage anytime that we're in session, and we have the door locks. And again, I think you bring up a really good point. I mean, we do train our kids and our community to be polite. It's a difficult issue. I was leaving the other day, and from here or coming in, and the young gentleman wanted to let me in. He recognized me. And so I did. I let him let me in, but then we had a conversation like, do you know me? And again, part of our process is that we are not doing that. That's a very, very hard thing for us to ingrain, particularly with our visiting adults. So yes, we have a lot that we need to continue to do to say, you know what, I don't know you. I kind of need to do that, ignore and move on and let that person use the front entryways and not some of the side doors. Again, we're vulnerable in those areas. But it's a good point, and we'll make note of that, Bridget. I think for the board or any community member who notices those things, we need to know, right back to the administration and the principal, and we need to work to tighten that up. Yep. Thank you.
I would just second that. As a mom, I'd be very happy to sign in and sign out. Just for record that my child was accessed by me and that I was on the school grounds. It only brings comfort to me. It's not an additional burden for me to carry.
We do typically do that, again, maybe in this particular instance, or yours, because you're known, maybe. But we do ask that people sign in when they come in. Again, if we're a staff member, we don't sign in, we're a staff. But if you're visiting, we do want to know who's in the building. In the event that there's a fire alarm or an activity where we can account for people, we typically, that's part of the training, we take that book, that sign in, and we have to account, to the best of our ability, individuals that have come and or gone. And so we work at that as well. But thank you.
Right here.
I have one more question. When you're talking about the crisis response practices and stuff that go on, do teachers have a crisis response checklist, for instance, in their room with them, or something that they can carry? The card may be a little bit too small for all those types of checklists, but something that they can have if we're in hostage situations, for instance, or somebody belligerent coming in, screaming things. These are the steps you take. And do cafeteria workers and schools out, teachers have?
So I would be wrong to say we're perfect. I think one of the things that's really important is that we do work hard to ensure that the crisis teams communicate effectively. And just like here at the very entrance of you see there's a folder there that can be easily taken off the wall if we need to either stay in or go out. And that has, again, to what John said, it also is repetitive to the crisis commands. But if you don't have that on you or it came off, you have some other resources.
Right.
So we do. There's also a level of how much do we inform, because then we can further jeopardize the risk of the school. So some people want to know, well, what do we do with, what's going on with the video cameras and things of that nature. So there is an appropriate amount of vagueness that's appropriate also to preserve and protect, our safety issues.
David, I will say that we have a Schools Out member who's on each of our crisis teams and attends the meetings with us. And then also each area has, in addition to the plastic folders with the safety plan, they also have crisis buckets so that they have materials in there that they might be able to access if we did need to relocate, emergency parent phone numbers. So each teacher's asked to, there's kind of a skeletal, here's what's in your bucket, and then they also can add extra things if they need to relocate.
And the other thing that we've done, and again, this is in part and play to kind of the evolution of our crisis work, we've definitely involved our South Burlington, responders, up to including our state police. They're often at our meetings and joining. And we have gone so far to make sure that they have the uploaded maps of our schools. So we have numbers on our windows, et cetera, so that can be communicated very quickly so that we can get to a location if we need to in an expeditious way.
So have you had any simulated live exercises in the school without the kids in case of an emergency?
So we've done a variety. I think at the middle school and the high school, it's safe to say that they actually exercise some of those protocols and procedures, and they actually check and kind of evaluate the effectiveness of their actual drill. I think the high school, similarly, I know that they go through that. We ask them. Part of the requirement in the law nowadays is that it used to be you had to do 10 fire drills per year, and you had to articulate that. Now there's flexibility in the law where you can substitute those fire drills for other related kind of crisis responses. I think they're up to 3 or 4, is that right? We can substitute those. We still have to do the fire evacuation, but we can substitute those. So we haven't done full-blown, we did way back just prior, actually, I don't know, maybe I was here, we did do a full-blown kind of mock situation. And again, I think we're sensitive to our adults needing to know and allowing our students, to be able to follow based on their developmental needs, their assets really, if you will. So, we're also conscious of, educational time and that balance, right?
Well, we should probably move on to the next one.
So the next, I just wanted to talk briefly about the parent-teacher communication to you, the board. Again, it's going to come up under the treatment of students and parents and guardians. That will come up under our monitoring report 2.1. So again, that's coming up in our next session, so I just wanted to allude to that. But again, I think, since we have some folks here, it's always nice to know that, providing us feedback on around how that can improve is always something that we welcome. So, again, if there's a particular question or something that you would like me to pay attention to when I do the report out, I'm happy to work that in.
Anything from the board on that one?
I think one item that I think consistently comes up is there a standard response time? And I don't know if that'll be addressed in that 2.1, David, but just acknowledging that is a common question that comes up.
Yeah, so it's, I do have it in there, it's a response time, and then how do we close the loop? So if a board member is informed, or one of our administrators, building administrators, how does that loop circle closed? Again, if you received the concern, you shared that with me, I shared that with the administrator dealt with it, how do you now know that it closes? So again, that's part of that communication. Or how do we celebrate, too, the successes and good things that are happening? So let me move on now to talking of, actually I have one more in there that I think would be appropriate, just real quick. Testing of lead in the water. I think many of you probably know out in the media and in many parts of our country has been some real concerns around lead factors in the water. And so, I want to, this is part of our team around looking at and really ensuring the safety of our kids. And I have to say our Director of Facilities, Bart Maselli, and John, come to me and say, I think it would be wise for us to do this, right? And so it's the result of that we then went forward and did some testing. Not high dollar, but it was important for us to do, and it came back very good. There are some things that we can do a little bit to improve it to excellent, but our water testing came back excellent. Again, we are part of the Champlain Water District, but nonetheless, we felt that was important, particularly given some of the attention that's happening in and around us, and we're sad for that, but we wanted to also make sure we're doing the right thing. So that's a little recap on the water testing. I don't know if you have any questions specific to that, or you did.
I think we're good.
So moving on into staffing needs. What I've provided the board, again, this is a typical, this does come up on an annual basis, it seems, when we look at volatility in our enrollments and certainly, some of the trends that are happening in our schools, in our individual schools, as well as in the district. So what's being proposed tonight, and I want to make sure I give you the opportunity to ask questions. What's being proposed tonight for you for action is that we add, from our contingency, a 1.0 FTE classroom teacher to Chamberlain. Primary focus, although not necessarily, there is flexibility that exists between our administrators on appropriate staffing, but what we know right now is that we have 39 students, I believe that's true today, Holly, as far as we know, 39 students currently enrolled in kindergarten. When I initially went out to the budget and using McGibbon's report and any of our historical, we believed that it was going to be down in that 32, 33 mark. And so there's a need, obviously, to add, from my perspective, to do so. Some other areas that I think are important in the classroom, there's some, what I'm going to say, watch going on, some watching going on, particularly at Rick Marcotte in grades 1 and 3, and at Chamberlain also at 4, and Orchard at 3rd. So we have, and you can see that from the data that's included in your packet, but there's certainly some other areas that we're watching. We typically get students into our district. I don't want to say always, but typically at the kindergarten level, we see in-migration more than we see out-migration. Other grades, there's some higher level of volatility in some of the first, second, and third grades. So again, at this time, I'm recommending a 1.0 FTE to Chamberlain. Next bullet point, 1.0 FTE Special Educator Outreach Coordinator. Currently, with some of the significant uptick in our therapeutic services, what has occurred is that it has fallen on the shoulders of our Director of Support Services, Joanne Godak, and also our high school CAS. They have important roles to really make sure that their special educators are able to be supported and doing the things that we need to be doing for our students in our schools. However, just as important as when we put them out into therapeutic places, which we're seeing increases, we need to ensure that we, as the LEA, are out there providing the support and needed. And I think clearly from your perspective, over the last 6 months or more, you've seen, I would say more, you've seen an uptick in some of those services that have been needed. So this asks for a recommendation of a 1.0 FTE Special Education Outreach Coordinator. And then finally, a 1.3 addition to our high school. And again, this is not in just a 1.0 person. There's fractional needs here based on increased enrollment. Although that's not totally accurate. Enrollment isn't really the area. What I think is important to note is that we have students, some of which are here, taking far more courses than ever before. We have a program of studies that allows students to sign up for what they want. Typically in the past, I would say way past, students would sign up for not quite as much in their senior year after college acceptance or some of those directional focus that they know. And so what we're seeing now is, as a result of our program of studies, more and more students are heavily engaged throughout until their graduation. And so as a result of that, we build the program of studies, the students sign into those programs, and then we work up the number of FTE needed to do that. Now, clearly, we can support our incoming freshman numbers, which are higher, particularly from our tuition students. We can support them by taking some FTEs from our upper end course staff, but we're not able to then maintain those upper level programming. So that's the recommendation regarding those. So it is a 3.3 FTE add. Again, as I said earlier on the 1.0 Chamberlain, there is money that's in contingency that is in the budget. The 1.0 FTE outreach coordinator can be funded, and I can let Joanne speak to this a little bit, but it can be funded either through our reimbursement expense at 57% or perhaps through our block grant, which would be covered completely. And then the final portion, obviously, the 1.3 fractional in total, obviously would be supported by our tuition increase. Currently, our tuition numbers from the islands, and I understand we have a gentleman here from Grand Isle, welcome, as they are looking to figure out their future, and perhaps with us. We currently planned and budgeted 142 students coming down from the islands. We see in your report we have 175, and we have 7 additional students that have confirmed registrations into the middle school, bringing the total up to 182. I certainly know from the board in the past that, our tuition numbers are volatile, and I'm certainly aware of how we staff, but also I want to be an advocate for those experiences that we know are so critically important. So let me stop, pause, and answer any questions that you folks might have.
David, can you tell us why the special education outreach coordinator and even the high school ads were not budgeted in this budget process? Because
well, let me take a quick shot, and then I'll let Joanne go. But certainly, I think that you, back in January of 16, January 13th, special board meeting, we talked about kind of the uptick in therapeutic related services. And as a result, we were pretty clear about some of the staffing and the outreach needs, but I think we were short-sighted in how we were going to manage that. And again, that falls on me. But again, I think what we're trying to do is ensure that our students can get back into our least restrictive environment, and we need that liaison work critically. We didn't really think that deeply. And again, it's only continued to increase as opposed to decrease. We'd love to see that decrease. Joanne, do you want to speak?
There's also
more?
been students who have moved in from other communities. and we
Since
also-
budget time?
Yes.
Okay.
And the numbers have increased, and also, we have students who are also placed in South Burlington by the Department of Children and Families, so some of those students come, and they come with their placements already in play. So we have to, as an LEA, we have to try and make sure that those needs are being met. So the numbers have greatly increased, and it was we planned to try and move kids back as well, so the needs are also more intense than they had been in the past. And, in my report, I write about that the needs are really growing in intensity. So we can build our systems here in the school, but there's still students who need to have those kind of supports that are in a smaller, more therapeutic environment, so.
Do you have an off-the-cuff number of how many have increased since we passed this budget?
I don't have an off-the-cuff number, but I could get that for you
Okay,
if you
great.
needed it.
Yeah, thanks.
Julie, part of that wasn't it? I know that you've received some of this in the past, but this was our January
Right.
13th special board meeting when we did we did a 7-year trend.
Right.
And it may be something that, again, would be important for me to provide another update to that, or we ought to keep this on a more frequent basis. Again, the business office, along with my office, are watching the FTEs and trying to navigate the best way that we possibly can to support our learners. So, anyway.
David, you had mentioned the block grant on that. Can you explain that?
I think you're
a little
talking
bit?
about, federal funds.
Federal, consolidated.
So we get direct federal funds that we can use to support total special ed spending, and
Yep.
at this point, we don't even know how much we're getting from the federal funds, but as I looked at the budget, it looks like maybe I could fund part of that position, not the full position with the federal funds. So thinking part of it could be funded through federal and part of it could be funded through the state reimbursement.
Okay, so that's what David's articulated
That's what he was
in his notes. It's
referring
not
to.
something else. Okay.
Yeah.
Patrick, I would also say that as Joanne has had to go to more outside locations, that we see less of her in our schools, and we know that the needs in our own schools are going up. And so I think giving her more time to spend in just the 5 schools would really support some of those students
Yeah.
and hopefully keep them out of some of those therapeutic placements.
Thank you. Other questions from the board?
I'd like to take maybe a 20,000-foot view at this, and looking at the specific recommendations, David, these may be the best 3.3 net FTE ads that the district needs right now in terms of meeting its needs. But we've had this conversation before around planning, and I'm looking at the data the board was presented, and over the budgeted FY 15-16, we're looking at basically 13 FTE ads. That's about a 3% increase to staff. We know staffing represents, with wages and benefits, represents about 80% of our budget. And with that 3% add and 13 new FTEs, that's occurring in an environment where our enrollment is declining at 2%. And intuitively, that is the trend that's happening at a state level that is making education unaffordable. And to your comments and our legislators, the math just doesn't work at some point. And I know this is not a math question when we're looking at staffing resources that support our kids, but at the end of the day, every decision that's made around an FTE does go into the budget. And the trend of staffing increases when enrollment is declining is unsustainable. And I'm not going to comment on the validity of specific positions, because I think we have to, as a board, trust our administrators to make good recommendations. But we took a budget to this community that was approved about less than 10 weeks ago. And that included more than 9.5 new FTEs. And that was a very tough sell at the time. And 10 weeks later, we're looking at another 3.3 FTE adds. So my question is, what can we do to get better at forecasting and planning? I'm a little reticent to continue to listen to the forecasting that's coming from, I don't know if it's a demographer, but we have great relationships in South Burlington with Let's Grow Kids and the preschool programs. I really wonder why the kindergarten enrollment always seems to come as a surprise. So I was really disappointed to get this report and get this request from administration. And again, I'm not going to comment on the specific positions, but I will comment at that 20,000-foot level on the trends.
Well, I would be wrong to say that I wasn't concerned. I think when we put the budget together, we use the best data that we have. I think when we see slightly downward turning enrollment and increasing need for services, I think we have a societal issue. And today, Martin and I were at an event today talking about with Let's Grow Kids and some of the therapeutic data that's going on, and the need for qualified care providers out in our community is upon us. And we know that there's some very, very concerning things that are happening for our young children that manifest themselves. So yes, we're going down a slight 2%, but those related issues are going up exponentially. And I think, again, to Ann's comment, I don't know how to predict that. I mean, we're doing the very best that we can, but as we go out into our early childhood centers, into our kindergarten, and we don't necessarily, there's a higher level of volatility around the numbers of students that are coming into kindergarten than ever before, even based on live births and whom we think. That's definitely our highest piece. We work really hard with Growing Kids South Burlington to get our numbers, and that's where that was based on. But again, the principals and myself, and the central office folks, we continue to look at it and watch. And I would like not to add another staff. I think that also adds to questions around appropriate onboarding, appropriate selection, all of those. That there's a ton of services that need to go on. But that said, I also am a strong supporter in early childhood proactive services. And I would venture to say that we're not there yet, because children come to us at age 5, some into our preschool programming, and they have had some fairly significant issues that we're trying to now correct. And that, as you know, based on the brain science, that's that 0 to 3. How are we helping our children, be successful as they progress? So I get it. I don't have a formula for it. I'm not. Obviously, it's a big issue, or it wouldn't be in front of you tonight. I know that I'm not alone. I have a lot of my colleagues out there that are in different places, I would say, that are significant decreasing enrollment, but significant increasing related matters. And again, I think Act 46 is certainly a conversation and plays into this a little bit, but nonetheless, we have students that aren't going to go away, and they need the services.
David, can I just say, Julie, I looked at my numbers, it's about 8 students.
Really? Wow.
Yes.
How many did you say?
8.
8, thank you.
Thanks.
Since the budget.
Since I did my budget.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this for a long time, and what often happens is it will be kind of the ratio. One student, how many students to an adult? And I've got to tell you, in my time, there are students that we would say, wow, they're really doing great, and they don't need a lot of service. Again, this is back to least restrictive, but then there are some students that are in need of a lot of time, and that ratio that we try to apply is very, very difficult to apply universal based on some of those needs that the students have. So, again, I jotted notes when our legislators were writing. I think there's a need for a more focused attention around how we can keep some of this in check, or how we can provide more proactive services. Again, Martin and I were at an event that was talking a lot about how we can do some of those things more proactively.
So I would just add to what I think Elizabeth said. I mean, I struggle a little bit with the unpredictability of the kindergarten enrollment, and some of that is probably lack of understanding of the mechanisms and the inputs to that, and it's probably not worth getting into that conversation today. Again, once it's here, we have to do what's right. I would like to, at some point, spend some time understanding that a little bit more, just so I can process that a little bit.
On where the numbers come from in the budgeting, and then where they,
Yeah.
how they.
The source of input into this process, so that I understand it. 'Cause that is a pretty big variable, obviously. Anybody else?
Yeah, turning to the high school FTEs, I mean, how can we do better as far as predicting the number of students that we are going to have come to us as tuition students, which seems to be what is driving our needs for the FTEs there? I mean, I look at the trends, and this year seems to be following the trend that we've had over the last 3 or 4. Should we have done a better job of knowing that we were going to have an increasing number? Or what can we do to make sure we're doing better on knowing the tuition student count that we're going to get?
Well, I think this isn't embedded into Act 46, kind of the conversations that are currently happening, and Grand Isle is part of, and has put a request out for a side-by-side merger into South Burlington. Currently, what we have available in many of our communities that don't have a high school, they have open choice, unless choice is determined for them, but they have open choice. Our island students have open choice to go to high schools where they so desire. We do some outreach to help explain what we have in a way that helps support their transition. I suppose some people can say recruiting, but we really work hard to ensure that, the students have choices. And we love having the islands and the Georgia students into our system. That said, it's an open choice system. And the variability sometimes from our Georgia students to our island students, all the way up to Isle Mont, is changing. I would agree with you, Martin, that it is continued to be kind of on the uptick. And part and play, I think that's connected to the services, our staff, our teachers that are teaching our kids, and the program of study that we're providing them. And all the things that go along, our activities, which are, pretty significant. And I think, what we hear as our islands and Georgia students migrate, they talk about that very rich environment that draws them here. So again, I do think, this is, we're out of staffing for a second. We're also into master planning a little bit, but also in the conversation with Grand Isle, what does that do? Would that help us? Sure, if we had a side-by-side and they had an agreement with South Burlington, then there would be better predictability around numbers. So.
We don't have enough information about the side-by-side to inform this decision, but I do
agree.
think there needs to be some kind of return on investment analysis about tuition students into our district, because there reaches a point where there's so many students and we're adding FTEs at a rate that we really may not want to.
No, I think there's definitely some areas that are kind of red flagged. I would say currently, I don't think so. I think with our diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think that what we have currently is a very exciting opportunity for our students. I think most of our students, and I can defer to our students here, they have students that are beside them from either the islands or Georgia that, bring a wealth of experience, knowledge, and connection to each other. And I think it's really important. I do agree that if that number got so high where now we don't have capacity, we need to add on spaces, et cetera, I think that's where the conversation needs to really dig in deeper.
And while we're adding these kids to freshman year, we should be losing some of these kids from senior year. So is there some shifting going on rather than adding?
We do, Julie, but again, I think the similar upward trend, and Patrick will be here, I think, shortly, because he's welcoming new student night tonight. But he will tell you that, I think, and Norali and Isaiah can probably tell you too, that the uptick in the number of students that are continuing to sign up for more and more and more opportunities is part of what's driving that as well. So we have uptick in enrollment, we have uptick in students participating in more and more activities, and we are different. We do ask students to fill out their program of studies. What do they want to take? That is very different than other high schools. Other high schools say, this is what you need to take, And yes, they offer some co-curricular programming, but it's much more restrictive. And again, I think that's in part connected to what has made South Burlington, an environment that our students truly thrive. So I'm not disagreeing with you on where that marker is, or that circuit breaker is. Again, that's, I think, part of the larger conversation in master planning and visioning that we are going to need to look at.
And I guess I just count that the concern with if there is a concern with having increasing number of tuition students, I think it's great that we have such a good program that they're coming here, is maintaining that. If we all of a sudden have a big drop, that's when it becomes really difficult. I mean, because the amount of money we have to put into new FTEs relative to the amount of money that's going to be coming with those students, it works out well. But as we continue to build those fixed costs, and if we get a downturn, that's when it hurts. So
I don't disagree with you. I mean, when we bring somebody new on, we have to train them, we have to educate them, we have a curriculum that they need to become aware of. Definitely, that's time and money. But we also have circuit breakers in our contract where we can have a reduction in force. So there are circuit breakers in here in our contract. It's not something we like to do. Predictability is really an important thing around continuity of program, but we do have the opportunity to do that. And quite often we exercise that, across the district, sometimes perhaps to a fault when we make a reduction like I did this past year in the budget at Chamberlain School.
So the 1.3 add for the tuition students here that you're requesting is added to what was in the budget. There was an additional FTE already currently, right? So it's actually 2.3?
Right, but the net result out of the high school is a 1.3 FTE add.
Okay.
I mean, just another comment about that is that with the tuition students and with the money that it brings to the school, we are able to also maintain these rich programs. I know one of the ads is a 0.2 for Latin, and that's a program that's frequently cut in high schools, and there's not that many high schools in the state that probably offers such a rich program that they could have Latin, and having the extra funds from the islands allows us to do that kind of thing.
For our kids and for
the kids
from the islands,
well, that's
which has been
probably why they're coming.
But this, to build on that point, though, it does make me a little concerned if we're having people sign personalized learning plans at the outset based on the programming that we have, and that programming is dependent on this variable source of income and students that we have. That's a bit concerning, and are there some parameters that we need to set about how much more we're going to build onto that programming versus saying, this is what we have and this is what we can support given the variability? I really do feel like, and maybe because I'm a financial person, I do feel like there's a financial modeling exercise, which I know Dan was really encouraging as well. As Julie mentioned, I really do think there's an exercise that needs to be put in place with some sensitivity analysis to just how many students could we lose before we really have to start making major cuts. Yeah. And how much more do we feel comfortable increasing or adding diversity to the programs versus just adding more FTEs to add more sections of things that we're already offering as we add tuition students.
Don't get me wrong, if I had the opportunity and the financial model was different,
Yeah.
I would be likely wanting to add some additional opportunities for students in today's society and preparing them for their future. I think we still have some areas that we need to work on. That said, I'm mindful, although some of you perhaps maybe think not, to the financial implication. There's nothing more important than what we're trying to do is ready our students for that next step. And what we know is that when we do that right, they come back. And that's very true in South Burlington, very different than other communities. And so I don't have all the right metrics, no question. But I've been in education long enough and surrounded by some really smart people on my administrative team and teachers and a community that I think gets that. And I'm very concerned, to our neighbors not very far away, when those reductions start happening, things start happening. And they're not in the best interest of the community, certainly not for the students, but they're not in the best interest of kids.
I think, David, that is kind of at the root of some of my concerns is if we keep adding, at some point we will have to reduce. And what we have seen is some significant additions over the past, well, it's 12 months. I mean, we're talking about 13 net adds, basically. And I really am concerned it puts us at some exposure and some risk to be able to sustain those programs.
I don't
Because
disagree.
nobody wants to be in a position to cut things.
When you talk about the increases, again, part of this balance is that, it's a response to the therapeutic needs of our students, and it's also a continued response to ensure that we're providing the types of programs that we know are important for our students. So, again, I'm mindful of the FTE ad, I want to put a disclaimer in there that some of that is our due diligence around supporting our youth wherever they may be, whom are South Burlington children. And it's a very delicate piece, and I'm worried that we still don't have the right, ingredient to help them be successful. We're struggling right now. And again, I think Ann spoke to
Can I
it.
ask a question just to test that, what I think I'm hearing is so if we did have a situation where we suddenly started seeing a significant decrease in enrollment because students were making other choices. The way I think I was reading this is that doesn't mean that we would immediately have to reduce staff and cut programs. We would reduce staff because we'd have less students, but none of these are full-time. We're not adding new options. We're just
Sections.
We're sustaining things
Right.
for a larger population.
Well, again, I want to be careful. Martin, indicated Latin. It wasn't long ago. Again, those of you who remember Ted Manazar talked about having it and not having it and wanting it back. So we've done a small fractional FTE to have Latin. But I think you're very right, Patrick, around.
You can call me Martin. It's okay.
No.
If you don't want that.
If we have those
We get a
changes,
full guy.
then in part it is section related, right? And often, sometimes sections, just like classrooms at 39, don't necessarily honor a fractional reduction or an increase. So there's some delicate work there that has to go on schedule building and things like that.
Okay, thanks. Any questions from the public?
I'm just a little confused because in the last school board meeting, I thought that we were discussing that there was a potential to consolidate fully with the island students, and that David was doing an analysis to see if that full body could fit here, and because they were doing an Act 46 exercise. So
That's a true statement. We're going to cover that under master planning and visioning.
Oh, okay. Well, then can I ask my second question?
I don't know, let's find out.
There was also discussion last week, David, you were hoping to get some news on whether the airport commission would have money for Chamberlain for noise mitigation, such as air conditioning, insulation, windows. Did you get information back on that?
I would love to say I have all the information. They're going to give us all the money that we want, but not yet. Again, I've had the conversation, and the FAA and the appropriate committees and staff are getting back in touch with us on whether it would be. Again, I want to be clear. There's nothing been approved because it's very close to the 65 or the 70 decibel area DNL demarcation. There are opportunities that we can apply into, some of which can be for sound mitigation and air conditioning upgrades, up to also including deferring the cost to build or construct new. I don't have any of that feedback back. We've been ongoing around getting to the right people and getting that conversation
I thought
rolling.
there was a consultant that was supposed to come back.
Yeah, that's, I'm waiting on that. And again, as an administrative team, Carson Slenter from the middle school actually represents us on that committee and keeps me up to date around those meetings that they're having. And, I'm working hard to try to see what those options might be to add into kind of our future.
Great. Any questions on staffing?
Yeah, so do you have the ability to declare a cap on tuition students?
Well, two things, Tim. There's a couple different things. We have students who do not have a high school, and we have in the past welcomed or allowed. I don't know that we've ever turned away. I'm not certain of that, but we've welcomed those folks that don't have a high school as an option in what we would say a choice. We also, under Act 77, is that right, guys? It's been a while, Act 77, we have it was a school choice bill. Prior to, I believe about 3 years ago, we had agreements with Essex, Colchester, Burlington, and CVU and South Burlington, where we could have students be able to move amongst high schools, and we would basically pay that amount for whomever is moving. That went away when choice came to be, because it was choice without any resources or funding. And there is cap limits specific to that. And the board has exercised those cap limits. Because, primarily, and they can speak for themselves, I believe that resources do need to follow students. Some amount of resources. I'm not saying, that it has to be high dollar amounts, but it needs to be resources following students. And it could be graduated based on 5 students, 10 students, et cetera. But we contested that when it was done, and we were granted some level of flexibility, currently about to end.
So there, you can implement a cap or you can't?
The board certainly could. I think we have to be careful, though, because we have past practice here where we've allowed. So we would have to be a very specific reason, likely capacity, right? That we're at capacity, and we have no place to put the students. We have to be careful of not exceeding our codes and requirements in the classrooms or in the buildings. So those would be some of the things that would allow us to restrict.
But those Georgia Island students could go to another high school if you said you had reached a number that you were comfortable with in terms of deployment of your resources for the students.
Yeah, a lot of them do. A lot of them do after they do visits, and they make those decisions to go to BFA, BFA St. Albans, they go to Fairfax, they go to Essex, et cetera. They have those choices now.
So given the resources you have, you could say, next year, we really can only accept 128, let's say, and somehow you could declare that, and somebody could figure out how to fill those slots, either competitively or first come, first serve, or whatever, right? So
Currently now, we think that there's a cost-benefit analysis. There's an opportunity for us to continue. When we've had slightly downward turning enrollment, it's been allowing us to keep some of our critical programming for the students that come from the islands, as well as our students in South Burlington. So we see that currently it's been an appropriate and very welcomed partnership that's existed for, I don't know how many years, many, many years. It was within the last 7 years that we started to go to Georgia, as we had fairly significant requests to come down here.
And Tim, if I could add a comment there, I think the real benefit, rather than sort of doing things on a one-off basis each year, would be having a relationship where you can really plan together for a longer-term
with the other schools.
picture. Yeah, with a school, with Grand Isle or with Georgia or something, so that it's a longer-term plan, so you can really look at your resourcing or staffing needs or programming needs 5 or 6 years out versus 1 year at a time. I'm speaking for myself.
Yeah.
I agree.
Any other questions on the staffing proposal that we have in front of us? Yes.
So I appreciate all the aspects that go into this, and a lot of them came up tonight that I appreciate and are complicated, but the thing I really want to focus on, my question is the K-3 enrollments across the 3 elementary schools. I know the total average is class size of 17.2, but the range in class size is between 13 and 23.5. And you mentioned specifically that you have a couple classes that you're watching in terms of class size. And given the staffing pressures we talked about tonight, what do you mean by watching? So if we get another 2 kids in, let's say, 3rd grade at Orchard, what is the watching going to do? Are we going to add another teacher there and get that down within the range, or what flexibility do we have?
I would say that depends, Abby. It depends on a lot of different factors. I think that we've seen some levels of outmigration too, where students, particularly on the lower grades, those 1st and 2nd are moving. Again, we don't know if this is connected to housing. Again, we've been working to track that a little bit, but we've seen from the kindergarten to 1st, we've seen a slight decrease. We're going to watch those things, which means we're going to look at how we need to continue to support them, the students in the classroom. It may be that I come back to the board and say, as a result, we need to add another staff person. It could be, again, working with the principals, what would be the right choice to do that? It could be, some supports into the classroom, although we're trying to be sensitive to that. It could be a classroom teacher. It could be a fractionalized teacher. We've done some different things over the years of splitting a teacher from half here and half there. So there are things. What I'm sharing with the board is I'm watching, and those are the grades that I'm, along with the administrators. Again, we come together, as the 3 buildings, actually the 5 buildings, and we talk about where those concerning areas are. And there are other factors that go into looking at the students. It's not just a number. It's also about the services that are needed for that cohort group of students at that particular school. And again, that those can vary over time, and so we're mindful of that. And I know the principals and I work hard at it every day to try to make sure we're doing the right thing.
Thank you, Dan. Any other questions, board or the community? All right, we do have this warrant for action tonight. Do I have any motions from the board?
I'll move that we approve the recommendation of the 3.3 FTEs.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Opposed.
One opposed. Motion passes. Thank you. Under the superintendent's report, before we move on, David, I just want to, I didn't put this on the agenda formally, but do you have an update on conversation with Burlington and Chittenden South that we discussed last time on the funds?
I do not. I put a call out to the two superintendents that you indicated. I have not. I am going to see them tomorrow. I'm with them tomorrow. I'm at the Vermont Superintendents Association and our special education directors meeting at Lake Moray tomorrow and Friday.
Okay.
So I'm slated to follow up with them and get them pinned down.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir.
Mhm.
Moving on to master planning and visioning, and so I've got a number of things that we should probably talk about up here. Why don't we start with just an update from anybody on the board that was able to attend the last community meeting? I know I was not able to be there. I'm not sure who else was able to be here.
We had 3 of us there.
All right.
Which I think by the end there were more people from the community there than board members, but I don't think we ever got past the number of board members and administrators too. We got it right.
Okay.
It was a beautiful sunny day, lots of baseball going on and other things. But we did
Green up
have,
day.
so we had 2 tables of discussion, which I actually thought lent itself to very rich discussions of those tables. And a number of the people at my table, at least, were people who had been to other community meetings, so we could get a little bit deeper into issues and a little more pointed questions, and we really got deeply into some of the things that we haven't had a chance to talk about at other community meetings, and we'll post the notes from those online once we sort of, what I would like to do is, I'm in the process of sort of consolidating all of this, and I think we have our next one's our last one's on Tuesday. I think it probably makes sense as a process to consolidate all of that into a draft for everybody to approve and then put up on the district website as to where we are at the end of those meetings in terms of community feedback we've gotten at those meetings.
Great.
I thought it was a great meeting, even though it was small. I thought we
Great.
got a lot of good participation.
Good. So it seems like that model of doing a short presentation and then sitting down around the table has worked well for us the last couple of meetings.
I will say that we did not do the short presentation in front of the whole group. It really did feel
wasn't-
silly. I think
wasn't
there
that
were 3
big, yeah.
people at the outset. And so we sort of, at least at my table, I just sort of did a quick update on anything that was different than what we had said at
Yep.
any previous meeting or any update. Mostly it was updates that we had already said at our previous, public meeting that I just wanted to inform people who might not have been at that meeting or watched the television about, so.
Yeah, I would think the next meeting that we stay flexible and we find out how many people have already been informed about this, and if there's just a handful, maybe take them aside to a separate table and
Do the
have a
update, yep.
presentation that way. But I'll be prepared to do a presentation if we need to do something. I think that was the idea.
Okay. So our next community meeting, just for the record and for those that watch this, is May 24th at 6:30 at the Orchard School. So we invite everybody to come and enjoy.
Is there going to be childcare at that one as well?
I think we agree that we'd have childcare every single one, right?
I'm pretty sure.
all of them.
Do you know, Mike, do we have it set up right through Lee? Yeah, school's out. They've been doing a nice job. We've
And they do ask for registration in
yeah, I
advance
mean,
for
there's
that.
some, requirements around, diapering and things of that nature that they have to be, not in that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, and I guess I would also encourage folks, it's not just an Orchard School
No.
community meeting. At
point.
Chamberlain, we've had people from Central, from Chamberlain, from Orchard, and same at Central. So anybody who hasn't made a meeting yet should try to attend.
We recorded them as well, although we did have RETN at Rick Marcotte.
Was it? Yes.
And they actually
For our 2
traveled the
tables,
tables
yes.
and got some, I haven't seen that yet, but we were not able to have them at the one prior to that.
Chamberlain, yeah.
Chamberlain, right.
Yeah.
So they've been good, and supportive of the.
And I would just add that the meetings are not the only way to give input. So we're still taking input, even after this next meeting, we're still taking input via email, yeah, any way you can reach out to a board member is acceptable.
And, whoops, go ahead.
I just wanted to piggyback that, but the session I went to, there were not enough feedback forms, and I was curious to find out if you were going to be putting those online so that people could go fill out, put a survey monkey out or something, so that you could get a more broad, more complete response.
Yeah, I think we can probably take a look at that feedback form. I'm not sure we'd do a survey monkey, but we can probably make the form available.
Okay, would that be anonymous then? You know, if you hand it in with a crowd, you're anonymous. If you hand it in by yourself, that's not very anonymous.
It's pretty anonymous if you walk into the district. I mean, no one's sitting there watching what you're handing to, the front desk at the district. I mean, I would
Can you
still
email
think it's pretty-
attachments in on the district website?
People could scan them,
district email?
sure, they
Then
could send them in,
you
yeah.
can- That's
I think
anonymous.
there's different opportunities.
Yeah.
Okay. And David, I have down that you're going to be talking to at the Agency of Aging on the 25th. Is that correct? Or is that an old note?
It's probably a right note. I just can't recall in the top of my brain.
Well, and there was some confusion about that because there were at least 2 seniors who showed
Oh,
up.
no, they don't call it that, though. I'm sorry, Bridget. Go ahead.
Yeah. There were at least 2 seniors who showed up, I think, at City Hall on the 11th, I want to say it was, looking for a meeting that had somehow been discussed at some point, and it wasn't happening, and no one could tell them when this meeting was supposed to happen. I do have in my notes that I'm supposed to be in that meeting on the 25th, that it was supposed to be like a lunch at like
The
12:45.
Young at Hearts, right? John and I
Yeah.
typically always go to we very much enjoy their lunches. But we were gonna talk about that. So I'll find out. We don't.
Okay.
It's our, I think Young at Hearts or something like that, right?
Okay.
Is the name.
Where is
So
it?
It's usually at City Hall. Every Friday they have lunches. Everyone's welcome. And it's just a great way to connect, listen, and learn. And we've used that as an opportunity to update them. This will be the first time that we would be doing anything around master planning with them, I think, although we probably touched upon some of those things when we talked about budget. And I can't remember if I had any of the board members with me at any of those. I'm not sure. But we have in the past.
I'd be interested in going to that as
Right.
well.
David, have you had additional feedback coming in from staff at this point?
I have not actually done that analysis. I'm not sure. I don't want to put on Meg or Delina. I know we've had some coming in because we pushed them out. I was sensitive to not do that until I had, the high school was a delayed meeting, and actually Martin came with me to the high school, but right after, actually, we sent those feedback forms.
Great.
So I think they're coming in. I can give a count on that and just let you know. I don't know if you want to differentiate, probably not. That's just
Well, we
staff
have
feedback.
on the spreadsheet, there is
There's a place to check.
place to check staff, so.
Yeah.
Great. Do you have any others besides that 25th that you're aware of planned? Okay.
No, I
So
think
the 24th and the 25th are the 2 that we have on the books right now. Okay. And we have 2 committees that we've formed recently to kind of dig in deep. So I know Martin and I are working with you on educational value and opportunities and trying to get a little deeper into that conversation. And I believe Bridget and Elizabeth, you're working to dig into a little bit of the financials. And those are both relatively new committees, so we're just getting started. If anything you guys want to add on those for the record?
No, it's gonna take a little bit. I mean, we're not gonna be able to turn around right away because it's quite a bit of
Complex.
information. It is complex, so, but we have started our work, and we'll continue it.
And I was not at the last meeting, but have we divvied up the FAQs in any way yet?
Well, I think through this committee,
my
well,
next
through this committee work, it might actually be leading to that, because the questions that are being asked, I think through what we're doing, we're gonna have the answers, so.
Yeah, so I think we did tag them with who we thought should answer them, but I don't think they've been divvied out to actually get answered yet, right? Is that
I think
fair?
we tagged Elizabeth when she was not at the last meeting.
I was fearful of that.
So we'll tag that for our next conversation. We'll get a status update on where the committees are with our work and then see if that helps inform our conversation on those Q&As, so we can get those out there.
Yeah, the only thing I would flag is that if, I noted a number of them were to have staff especially your staff, help answer some of these questions. I should probably just sit with you at some point and make sure, because we're losing you so soon, who the right people are for the specific frequently asked questions, because I think, as you said, that, or as Martin said, a lot of that will come out of the work that we're doing in the subcommittee, but we just need to know who the right contact points are for that work.
And so why don't we jump into, David, your update on the Grand Isle exploratory conversations we've been having.
So I think we actually, and I'm sorry, I don't know your first name. I know we've been dealing with Andy Julo, I believe.
Tim Maxim, South Hero.
Hi, Tim. Nice to have you here.
Thanks for joining us.
From Grand Isle. And so, for those that don't know, although I said it earlier, we have students that come down to us from Islamont, North Hero, South Hero, Grand Isle, and they have had the opportunity to engage in our programming. This past, I don't know exactly when, we got initial requests from their committee, their Act 46 merger committee, which was part of the obligations under Act 46 to merge. They need to establish a committee. They need to begin looking at some of their data. They're pretty far along. I don't want to speak for them, but they're pretty far along. They went out and got a consultant, actually retired Superintendent Mike Deweese, who used to be the superintendent in Essex Junction, and also Essex Junction in town, as you know, were part of the Act 46 successful merger. And under the provisions of Act 46, there's many different configurations, one of which that is being considered is whether or not a side-by-side merger could possibly exist. Currently, we already have talked about the number of students that come down to us, the volatility of that a little bit, sometimes in the unknown. But currently, what I did, again, conversation with the board, or you, Patrick, was to look at, do we have capacity currently existing in our current configuration? Now, I don't want to try to jump too far forward to talk about master planning and those scenarios, but it's really looking at our current construct of our 5 buildings, essentially, and do we have capacity? And so we currently, under a K-5, all elementary students all coming to us, that's not the actual request currently that's in play. We could not accommodate all of them based on the numbers. When it begins to change a little bit, again, that would be under a K-5 scenario. If 5th grade came up to the middle school, then the scenario begins to get much, much better. And we could easily accommodate under that particular scenario under our current construct. That said, we would absolutely have to redistrict our school. We'd have to talk about the students that are currently from the various locations. We'd have to do some mapping of that, and we would have to make some determinations around what schools the students would attend. And so that's where we're at. My recommendation currently would be to, we did reach out to the Agency of Education to look at an individual there's a merger study committee grant that helps defer some of the costs to have somebody. We do have some individuals that have been named that could help us, but I haven't done anything yet with them until we were able to affirm this. I will send this to you. I'll send it out to you folks. We've done kind of this raw number crunching, looking at capacity and looking at the numbers that are currently out there coming from the islands.
So David, you said, I think I heard you say that if the K-5 from all of the schools in Grand Isle County were to come down, we could not do that with our current capacity unless we move the 5th grade to the middle school.
Right, that changes it.
Right.
Currently, we would be 84 students short, and we're looking at capacity limits.
Yep.
And so this would slightly go contradictory to some of the things that we're talking about in master planning and visioning, about looking at, flexible learning spaces and things of that nature.
So my question is, there's only 3, I believe, that were interested in moving the
That's right.
elementary. So if you look at 3 versus all 5, what's the capacity scenario?
Very favorable. It's very favorable.
Without a move to the 5th grade to the middle school, or?
We could do it with just those students coming. We would still we would need to redistrict, though. We would need to redraw our lines because we would have we'd have to figure out where we go, where the students would go, and we would have to redistrict in and amongst South Burlington as well, based on our enrollment numbers.
Okay, so
have capacity.
K through 5, all of Grand Isle wouldn't be possible unless we move 5th grade. K through 5 for the 3 that we believe are interested, we could without any physical changes to our building, no movement of our grades. But you'd have to redistrict. Why would we have to redistrict our kids to accept kids coming from another county?
I think, and part of this would be if we're welcoming new students, it's an opportune time for us to balance some of the current numbers that exist within our own city. So again, my recommendation would be strongly to look at redistricting, phased redistricting along the implementation. Again, we've got very different, socioeconomic things. We have opportunities that we definitely know exist, and this would be an opportune time to look at that.
So it's an opportunity, not a requirement.
Well, again, that would be
I'm trying to nail you
that would
down,
be my
sorry.
recommendation, because I don't think necessarily you're going to say one school, you're going, this school and this school, you're going to,
Right,
Big
right,
Market.
right.
This school and this school, you're going to that
Right,
school,
you may
right?
live next to each other in
Yeah.
your town, but we're putting you in two different
So
schools
again,
here.
I haven't,
understand.
we haven't gone down deep yet.
Right.
Again, what you
No,
asked
yeah.
me is whether or not we had capacity.
Yep.
And so I'm simply saying capacity, but I think we have a whole litany of, questions that
Yeah.
need to get affirmed. And, I've got limited staff hours available, and would certainly think it would be wise,
Yep.
particularly to get folks that run the financial model and can meld in with some of the things that we're working on under the master planning and visioning.
Yeah, I think, let's hear from Tim.
We aren't talking the lower grades. We're talking the 7th and 8th grade and possibly the 6th grade.
Okay, so no K through 5.
No, they would stay on the islands. in the-
Okay.
In the
okay.
schools that they're.
That's not the impression we had initially, so that's good that
Okay.
you provided that update.
Yep.
Could I
Please.
speak to
Please,
to
go
some
right
of the
ahead,
issues?
please. Go
Okay.
right ahead, sir. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, my name is Tim Maxim. I'm from the class of 71 here.
Yes.
And,
Welcome back.
I thought we recognized you.
The history goes back basically 50 years, because my freshman class in 67, a lot of the kids, vast majority of them, South Hero, Grand Isle, and North Hero, came to South Burlington. Prior to that, a lot of the island kids were going to Milton High School, and in the late 50s, most of them went to Linden and boarded over there. I graduated from 71. My brother graduated in 73. I had a sister in probably 77, and a daughter in 204, 205, somewhere around there. I have 4 children, 3 daughters and a son. Excellent children and so forth. You talk about school choice. My second and third daughter graduated from BFA Fairfax. And my son attended Colchester and got into Essex Tech and basically graduated from there. So we have the whole realm, we've got around. And you're talking here earlier about number of students coming in and how you plan for them and that type of thing, and the tuition. We have the same problems in our towns when we're creating a budget, because we know how many students are graduating from 8th grade, and it could be 25 one year, and it could be 9 the next year. It's that far out of the realm. And at some point, I think that all these school districts try to find out before they graduate where the students want to go. But lots of times in trying to put a budget together and figuring out where the students are going, it's hard to build a concrete budget. And if we have 3 or 4 students come in sometime during the year that we have to pay tuition for at $15,000 a pop, it messes our budgets up real quick. This is from our supervisor union, or just rough numbers so that you know what we're talking about here. They're from the islands, the 5 towns. 34 are going to MVU, 42 to BFA, 57 to Colchester, 46 to Essex, 79 here to South Burlington. 1 to BHS, 3 to CVU, 1 to maybe Milton, I guess it is. And surprisingly, there's 23 that go to New York, from the northern end of the county. And then there's a few that, private schools, that type of thing. There are 93, well, first of all, In Isle Lamont and North Hero do not offer 7th and 8th. So they tuition their students out grades 7 through 12, and they started this a number of years ago. There's 26 in Isle Lamont. There's 42 in North Hero. Grand Isle tuitioning grades 9 through 12 have 91 students. South Hero has 56, and Elberg has 93. And so it gives you some idea of numbers and where they're going. And until I saw this chart, I had no idea where all the students were dispersed to. I knew that, you know, South Burlington was up there. It has been historically over the years, but it has varied, you know, when Colchester built their high school, when Essex came along, and sometimes it doesn't make any difference what the schools are, it's just the kids and the demographics, maybe where their parents are working, and what works out well. And the other thing over the years has been transportation. Okay, when I started, I had a neighbor that bought a bus and provided transportation, because there's no transportation provided 50 years ago. You got here any way you could. He bought a bus and filled it out of the 3 towns. And then when he got done, at some point, the district, the high schools, receiving high schools decided that they could afford transportation. We got South Burlington, Colchester, Essex, and I'm not sure if there's any others. And that makes a difference on where people go. So with that said, Act 46 has come along, telling us what we need to do, and none of us are happy about it. We like what we've got, and that's part of the problem. We formed the committee back in August, and, you know, we've talked about different things and scenarios. The hard thing for us is, the first thing is Grand Isle County, the 5 towns or districts get together and form one district. That would be simple, except that the 2 towns, Isle Lamont and North Hero, are offering just K through 6. The 3 larger towns offer, well, pre-K now, pre-K through 8. And the law says that we all have to have the same model. It's either everybody takes K through 8 in the islands, or everybody takes pre-K through 6. And so that is forcing Isle Lamont and North Hero. They like the pre-K through 6. They've experienced it. And when they started out, some of the students went to Grand Isle neighboring school. This year, there's no students in those 2 towns that stay on the islands. They all, and a majority of them, come here to South Burlington. I think in Isle Lamont, maybe 1 or 2 go to Champlain, Northwest Clinton, or whatever it is. And so that's the dilemma we've had, and if we don't get together in the right way, Act 46 has talked about the incentives, a tax rebate discount, and 3 of the towns have a small schools grant, and we have hold harmless or a phantom student type thing, which is beneficial to us. And so this is what we've been wrestling with. And I can answer, that's enough explanation for now. I can answer any questions that you have. I would say that we met last night, the Act 46 committee, and it was a unanimous vote that Isle Lamont, North Hero, and Grand Isle would form a district, or at least put it out to the voters, form a district of pre-K through 6 on the islands. That would mean that in Grand Isle's case, their 7th and 8th graders who have stayed in Grand Isle would be tuitioned out, and they'd have school choice just like the high school students do. And South Hero has not got to that point. Isle Lamont has made the Elberg has made the statement that they want to keep pre-K through 8 in Elberg. South Hero basically is the same feeling. They'd like to keep pre-K through 8 at Folsom. But there's a faction there. There's some people that would like see the opportunities of education being offered for the 7th and 8th graders off island. And we're having a South Hero board meeting tomorrow night. Hopefully we'll discuss it some more. So we don't really know where we are, except that by doing this, and the other thing is that the law says, or one way to get around it, those 3 towns, Isle of Mont, North Hero, and Grand Isle, are going to be necessary in the vote. South Hero and Alberg are going to be advisory. So if we put this plan out to the 5 towns, the 3 towns that are necessary have to vote, all 3 of them, in favor of accepting the proposal, and then they could go ahead with their system of pre-K through 6. If we were to, South Hero is to decide that we're going to proceed putting that model out and the townspeople voted it down, it wouldn't kill what the other 3 towns have done. And I mean, we've gone through this process trying to learn what Act 46 is or isn't and what it does and what it allows you to do or not to do. It's awful complicated and we aren't quite sure where we're headed. But
Thank you, Tim.
and the idea, realizing that when we were talking in South Burlington, and we've also took a look earlier talking in Georgia, Georgia is a pre-K through 8 and favors their school choice. And most everybody in the islands favors school choice for high school. And that's one of the issues. And I think, I'm not sure when you met with the people that came down before as to what they wanted to do or what they were looking for. Isle of Mont and North Hero are willing to try and talk or discuss a side-by-side or something. And that merger with South Burlington means that they're merging with a district that has pre-K through 12, and that would eliminate their school choice. And that means that their students would have to come here to South Burlington. And so those are the things that we're looking at and the dilemmas and.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I know we had a question in the back as well. Yep.
I have a question regarding the status of master planning and visioning. Tonight, there's been a great deal of discussion about tuition students coming in from these 5 other school districts and how that would fit in here with capacity, resources, and so forth. There has been, in my opinion, much less discussion about what happens to the students who live in South Burlington, are enrolled in the 5 schools, and who are facing questions regarding what kind of school system they will be continuing in, if they will continue in place in the current schools with enhancements. They'll shut those down, go to a major mega elementary school, and I think before so much emphasis is given to incoming students from other places, even discussing, you mentioned the possibility of having to relocate the 5th grade in order to accommodate incoming students. I think the priority should be the present students who are here in South Burlington going to school here, and I think that makes much more sense than putting the horse behind the cart. And I don't understand, when are you going to make a definitive conclusion to all of the input? There's a lot of talk about input, but the input is not discussed.
Thank you for your comment. I will speak, at least on my behalf. I'll let the board speak as well. I know we're still trying to get community engagement. As you heard, the last community meeting, we had very few people show up. So I think we're still trying to make sure that we've heard from all of our constituents as much as possible. These are the last 2 that are scheduled right now. So, and we've also started 2 subcommittees to dig deeply into both the costs and some of the educational opportunities. And that'll help answer those questions that were presented in the community meetings. And then we can start talking about a decision. Anybody else want to add anything else to that?
I would They love that. And from Georgia. It's, just completely adds to the student body. Really impressive.
Thanks. So, one of the things that we had talked about as a possible, or David had mentioned as he was reporting about the Grand Isle capacity question, which I think is a little bit different now that we just heard from Tim, so we'll have to kind of assess that. Part of this was, do we want to apply for the study grant? And before we answer that question, you and I had a short conversation about just capacity. And I think to the question that we just got a second ago, where was our priority from a pure workload perspective? We have a number of things in the hopper, we'll say, that we're working pretty hard on. Part of my question is, how much more can we put in the hopper and deal with before we answer the question about whether we want to apply for this $5,000 grant?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it, the application is not that time consuming, but getting somebody on board who's currently gone through some of this very specific work on the Act 46 merger and could begin to ascertain from their consultant, Mike Deweese, to really pull together the numbers and to begin looking more deeply for you to then have that opportunity to dig deeper, around what you might be thinking. Again, there may be data that does not or does support, some different configurations. I don't know. But again, I think it would be wise. I don't have currently the resources to do it right. I mean, we can do it. We've done some preliminary work, but it becomes far more complex around this work. So I would be strongly recommending, if you are wanting to go forward based on the conversation, then I would reach out and put an application in. And again, I've gotten a response that there are 2 individuals that I think were fairly prominent educators in the state of Vermont interested in doing the work. I would see that you would have the opportunity to interview them and make a decision based on, kind of that, whom you would best like. And again, we're not talking a significant amount of time. We're talking about there's, $5,000 is a lot of dollars, but there's kind of a start and an end time there.
What's the time commitment for the?
I don't really know. I mean, I know, and maybe Tim can speak to the involvement that you had when Mike Deweese first started under the $5,000 limit. Now you've gone under a much bigger umbrella.
The original grant from the state was $20,000 for the Act 46 study committee. The towns also had to, proportionally, we had to kick in $5,000, so each town had something into that budget. So we've got $25,000 to pay for Mike's services. Andrew Pond is also involved in that. And then legal fees, there's some legal fees involved with
the writing and stuff.
The writing and that type of thing.
Well, it seems to me that we could talk to folks at the Vermont School Board Association just initially to float that this is out there, that we're thinking about it, and get some initial feedback from Nikki, who coordinates for VSBA on mergers, to find out how much, what does this give to South Burlington? How would this work? I would suggest that as a first step, and before we pull the trigger on.
It's good.
On getting a consultant.
David, as I understand it, if Islemont and North Harrow were to say approach South Burlington, and there was a merger there, an agreement that say they would lose their school choice because they'd be coming into a pre-K through 12 system. It would also, even though South Burlington hasn't been real interested because they didn't need the numbers, they didn't need to do anything from Act 46, those 2 towns coming in and merging with South Burlington, then you'd be combining their budgets. They would come into your school board system, governed by their two towns out there would be governed by this school board, along with, I assume,
some membership
representation
change, yep.
from them out there. But it would also, in that merger, would give South Burlington those tax incentives that you've heard about, a discount on your tax rate. And if we take a vote, if you had a merger or a vote before June 30th of
17.
Yeah, June 30th of 2017. Then you'd be in line for the tax incentives over a 4-year period of a discount of 8 cents, 6 cents, 4 cents, and 2 cents. And our timeline has been, and it's going to be awful close, but we were looking to whatever we did, try and put a vote to the citizens of Grand Isle County election day in November. And we would know where we are from that, and whether things could be worked out between the two, or we'd have to go a little bit longer, but we do have, still from that point in November till June 30th to try and get something resolved.
Okay.
As far as the merger goes.
And I just, I mean, the tax incentives certainly, are interesting and important, but I think what is really important in this discussion is the fact that we get kids from the islands, from these districts that come to our high school. And here in South Burlington, increasingly, we're having very coordinated, consistent curriculum and process from pre-K, all the way to grade 12. And that's the benefit I see, that if we are working on a coordinated curriculum, coordinated education system with the kids that we're getting anyway, but starting with them very early, I think that's a huge benefit that we should be aware of and tend to, more so than a shorter term tax incentive, so.
Good
Any other
discussion.
questions from the board, from the public?
I think I'm struggling a little bit with I'm assuming that any evaluation relative to Act 46 would be in the context of no changes in the current South Burlington school configuration. But I also, because I think the master planning and visioning is sort of first and foremost in this board's mind. But I also kind of am I don't even know how to evaluate at this point the notion that the tax incentives could become a funding mechanism for improvements at the high school that we've talked about, or that the predictable enrollment might become an opportunity to sustain programming. And there's a number of thoughts going on in my head that aren't necessarily linked to our priority right now, and the tight time frame that you're talking about too. So I think we have to be sure we're operating on the same assumption that if we move forward, and maybe this is where VSBA can help guide us, the assumption is that our configuration stays the same. And I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I think we have to do something like that. Yes, yeah.
Well, and the other thing that I believe is true is that if you want to take advantage of this Act 46 consolidation, you have to be operational with it by July of 2019. And so if there was a required school configuration change that was significant, that would be almost impossible.
Yeah.
So that might be a foregone conclusion.
Well, should we see if we can get somebody from VSBA to come to one of the next couple board meetings, just as an initial kind of feeling out the
I think that would be
situation?
good. Yeah, if we can hear it all at the same time, that'd be better than having one person reach out and then try to report back.
Right.
So I'm in a hold, I'll just wait until no contact with
As far as the official
consulting
application for a
ideas or-
grant, I
Yep.
would say,
Good.
yeah, we're just looking to maybe have a
Gotcha.
conversation with somebody at VSBA. Can you coordinate that for us?
BSBA?
Yeah.
I can, but it would be easier if one of you probably could
I'm
reach out.
happy to do it.
There you go.
Put on my
I didn't
to-do
do so
list.
bad.
Well rebuffed. All right. Any other conversation for tonight on master planning and visioning? We've got the upcoming meetings. We've got those two committees that are working diligently to get some more content available back to us. Constantly moving target. Okay. Moving right along. School board agenda number 10. So this is school board guidelines on the social media communications. We have distributed, you should all have a draft of that document in your packet. Looking for mine right now.
I guess I said, speaking of the VSBA, have we run this by them? Because they have some expertise in this kind of thing.
I don't think formally, no.
I think we should.
I would think that that would be a good next step. I thought it was fine. But I would
Okay.
like their input.
You'll coordinate that?
I'll make it one call. I'll add that to my to-do list.
So, communications guidelines. Any comments on this document?
I thought this was a good draft. When I think about the execution of this, I don't think there's anything different in terms of expectations of board members relative to social media or websites in terms of communicating district business. But the flip side is, in terms of participating on the sites, even as an observer, I feel, I have a concern that the content of any sites may not be representative of the whole community. So I worry that the board might become too dependent on feedback from social media sites. However, whoever initiated them or whatever the content is. And, I think there's some benefit to sort of be specific about the venues that the board seeks community feedback. And it's kind of convoluted because we want as much feedback as we can get.
Right.
But we have to ensure that we're giving audience to folks that maybe don't often get to provide feedback. And, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all a little bit of self-selection, but we do know there are groups that we don't meet for various reasons, or that don't speak to us in some way.
Right. So you're looking to add something to speak to that dynamic a little bit? What I agree with what you're saying, and most of this is written in as we're trying to communicate out.
Yeah.
What do we do? And that's more of a, who do we listen, how and where do we look for
How do
information?
we solicit, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I also worry a little bit that even as people listening to a certain site, we become, the impression is that we sanction it in some way, and that's a big concern for me. I don't think there's anything we can necessarily do about it, except for not comment on it, but
Right.
it's concerning.
Yeah. Social media is the dinner party of the, of the year, of this century, or whatever we want to call it. We can't control what people are saying. Nor would we want to, I guess.
And maybe what I'm saying is just clarity on the middle of this page, which is what are the district's current and sanctioned communication practices? And I think we can add to those over time.
All right.
But just to be clear that official information in terms of board business will be communicated through these vehicles.
Right. Okay. So making some adjustments to that section to speak about kind of the two-way, not just outgoing. Okay. Any other comments at this time? Okay, so I'll make a proposed change to that section and send it back out to the board members through David. And then, once we're all comfortable, we can just make this public as well. There's nothing we can't make public about this one.
And I'm gonna run this by VSBA. Is that what we agreed as well? Okay.
Perfect.
I'll
All
wait
right.
until you send me the new version.
Okay. And then under, just because we're talking about communications, I just thought this would be a good time to bring up the next article for the other paper is due on 5/26. I think that's yours, Bridget.
Yes. And the next step was is to talk to Patrick Burke.
Who just snuck out, by the way.
Who just snuck out before we talked about it, of course. And his schedule has been quite full. So tomorrow, I believe, that we are meeting,
Awesome.
finally. And hopefully that will be enough information to write this article, because there's not a lot of time to follow up after that. But yes, it's in progress.
Great, thanks. All right, agenda item 11, I believe, retirement investments.
I'll let John talk to this, although this, I think you all were well-versed or well provided with information and I think questions from SEI at the last meeting. As requested, it's back in front of you with some additions here and clarity. But John?
Right. The presentation last week showed that SEI recommended Portfolio A, which goes three parts of this. One, that the assumption is that growth in large cap stocks, domestic large cap stocks, which has carried the market the last few years and gave us some good returns, is ending. So that there's more upside to going to world equity markets. And he cited the gross domestic product increase potential in China, India, in the East. That was the first thing. The second thing is that in order to get to our 7% goal or above, that our high yield and emerging markets debt, those instruments basically double. And the third is the risk management, in other words, fixed rate bonds are going to be tested because of the Fed's action or inaction. And the idea is that to have less in core fixed income, more in short-term fixed income, so there's flexibility there. So we don't have investment committee, and I just need a minute after we get through this to talk about that. But we always meet in my office with the fiscal manager and staff accountant with SEI. And this is informal, but I wanted you to know that we didn't agree 100%, but the prevailing notion is that SEI puts all these resources into coming up with recommendations for our retirement fund, and because of the change with the GASB and the interaction with our actuary and our third-party administrator, that they're in a really understand us. And secondly, they came with a similar recommendation to the city last year, who actually accepted it and changed this around. So our dissenting vote was more, hey, the large cap have worked in the past, let's just stick with it. And that's my own finances, I might do that, but this is we need to have that goal in mind of earning 7% or more. The second thing, and that would be the action item, the second thing is I have the groundwork done for having an investment committee so that the board wouldn't have to take this action. It would be done at that level. So Robert Fletcher's back next week to review that. And I wonder if I could get some time possibly with Julie to go through that and discuss it with Mr. Fletcher, just who would be on that committee and what the responsibilities are.
I'd like to be in that meeting if possible as well. I've sat on those types of committees. My husband sat on those types of committees. I think it would be helpful if I were there as well. So I'd volunteer
It's up
for
to the
that.
board, but yes, that's fine. Julie was on our committee to accept it, so
Yep.
that'd be a great combo, yeah. And we could get this off the ground before the end of June, before the second meeting in June, so, yeah.
My only question was whether I noted the fees that were in here. Is there any change from the previous ones? I wasn't quite sure, the fee structure that was in here. Is it any different than it was previously?
No,
Okay.
it's basically the more, and we're combined with the city on that to give us credit for the city's investments, which are 3.5 times more than what we have. So it's a good thing, but there's no extra fee for this.
Okay.
Any other questions for John?
I just had two quick ones. It sounded like the city was approached last year with a similar change. Is there some reason we weren't approached at the same time?
No, we were approached.
Oh, we were.
We were. At that point in time, I didn't agree with it. So, as a trustee, Yes, I didn't bring it for a change. But this committee would make that more, would be more transparent.
Gotcha. And I think the second question is more of an observation, that I typically haven't seen portfolio shifts of the magnitude of a couple of these. It seems to happen a little more slowly, so the portfolio can sort of test the market. But to see 6 points in each of the, like the large cap index and the top two.
Right.
That just struck me as a little bit more dramatic than I've seen portfolio shifts as it relates to defined pension benefits plans.
I don't have last year's recommendation here, but I don't think it was quite as pronounced, so this is.
So maybe this is a cumulative
It
two-year.
is, yes.
Any other questions for John? What's the form of our motion for this?
Basically to accept the investment strategy proposed by SEI, Portfolio A, and there's an amendment to the account that has all the whereases attached. But the basic thing is the investment strategy is the percentages by asset class.
Do I have a motion?
Question for the colleague, Alan?
Sure, go right ahead, Tim.
So, first question is, this fund is for the South Linden School District administrative pensions only?
No.
No.
It's for support staff. It's not for administrators.
Support staff, oh, okay.
It, actually, there's one administrator in it, the business manager. The teachers.
Is your pension fund for you?
Yes. Actually, it is. And 353 other people.
Okay.
Yes.
Second question is, are the current investments that are in today, are they proprietary instruments of this particular company? Or are they, like, for example, it's your investment strategy that's being proposed is all SEI instruments?
Right.
And so they are proprietary to SEI?
That's correct.
So do we have the expense ratios for each of these?
We do, yes.
And currently today, are they also in SEIs?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Are those expense ratios different?
I don't know the top of my head. We had them present last time, and they always present their returns net of their costs, net of actually the cost of payroll and the trust, which they also provide. So they give us the most conservative rate of return against the averages, the indices.
And the last question is will there be any benefit to combining the city and the school district's pensions systems?
Here's my opinion. We went through a process, and it took a year to change the investment manager that the city had. I think they were with Prudential, and we were with People's United. And we used our buying power to do that. And so we did a joint RFP, but the needs of the city for pension are totally different than what the needs of our support staff are. Our support staff pension is a supplement to Social Security, whereas in the city, you have police and fire safety services people where it's a huge part because they don't get Social Security. So, and there were many more people in this plan than there actually are in the city plan because it's the eligibility requirement is small and it affects a lot of people. Yeah.
Do I have a motion now?
I'll make that motion.
All right, do I have a second?
Second it.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right. Set the agenda for the June 1st meeting is next on our list. I would like to suggest that we move the no, where is it?
12, superintendent evaluation.
Superintendent evaluation out to the next meeting.
Okay. So the 15th, or
Yep.
whatever that one is.
Yep. Any other suggestions for the June 1st meeting?
Just, I've had some feedback from the folks at Common Roots, and they'd love to come in a future agenda item and just share with you a little bit about what they've been doing and ideas. I think, I'll just add it in there. Maybe we can combine it with some other things, but I wanted to at least make sure that that was known.
Okay, sounds good. We'll put it on the future agenda list so we don't lose track of that.
Figure it out. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have anything on the future agenda list that we want to move forward on the June 1st or June 15th agendas?
What's the change in location?
Oh, I'm sorry, we're going to be, I think it was originally scheduled for, not for the middle school, and now it's
Oh.
going to be at the middle school.
Correct.
Okay.
Given, you know, what you have going on that night and participation, et cetera, it was easier to do that.
Okay, by hearing nothing, we'll keep moving right along. Consider the minutes of the May 4th and May 5th meetings. Any alterations or changes to that?
Only that you're supposed to change action. to
Action, I know, I
consent.
got it.
But I remembered this time. You didn't give me a chance. All right, hearing nothing, those are approved by consensus. On the consent agenda, David, if there's anything you'd like to share?
No, there's a series of individuals here that are one-year onlys. There are some transitions here, so again, this is within budget, this is not part of any additional. So again, there's 4 hires, and then there's leaves of absences, as articulated, Steve Webster, .2, and Glenn Patterson, which was the addition, a .8 FTE special educator at Chamberlain. And then the other portion is the bids, the flooring. Again, I don't know, John, if you want to address that at all. I think it's pretty self-explanatory for what we're doing for Tuttle and Chamberlain, but I don't know.
Are there any questions on those bids before John? No? Any? Good. All right. Okay, they are self-explanatory then, thank you. So the consent agenda is approved. So the Munson Field Turf and Track Project.
So again, I'm going to let John talk to this. A lot of hard work anytime you get bid information in to look at them kind of side by side and apples to apples. So we wanted to get out information to you as soon as possible, but it was right up until, end of the day yesterday and then today to really solidify some of the specifics. So, John.
Actually, at your place, you probably have a one-pager from yesterday, but at your place, I've added a summary and a picture. So it's the same memo you got yesterday, but some added detail. As you remember, 5 weeks ago, we pre-qualified 3 contractors. One contractor, the price was going to be pretty high, and they recommended a different product, and it wasn't something we really wanted. So that's basically why they didn't bid. And we received 2, one from Progress, $889,000, and one $889,145, and one from RAD Sports for $998,300. These both are very well qualified contractors and have hundreds of installations, so I'm thankful for that. But the RAD Sports was well above our total budget. So we received the bids on Monday at noon, and then we had a meeting and got all our questions together and had interviews with the 2 presidents of these companies on Tuesday morning and got details back to share with you yesterday afternoon. The big key to this is that Progress has certified in writing that they can get this work done by August 18th. RAD, in addition to being higher, was able to get preliminary work done on the track, but wouldn't be able to come until October or early November to finish the track, which is very risky because of weather. And that is a big factor, and Mr. Young was there pretty passionate yesterday at our meeting about getting this done on time, so I was thankful for that, David. They also hire, I'm talking about Progress, hires EC Engineers Construction and Maine Tennis and Track, who we know, who has resurfaced our track, patched it up, lined it, that kind of thing. So we know those subcontractors. Finally, there's a list of the what's going to happen here. And I know a new track and a new turf field, but there's other things that go with it that are listed here, and I won't go through them now. And finally, there are some things we can do to add to the project, and something that was not picked up on by either contractor that we absolutely need. And so the total bid, the direct bid is $889,000. There's value-added recommendations, which would save us $40,000, which meaning basically the field events in the right D over by the woods would go away, and we were planning on moving them anyway, but just have no field events there. That would save money on the field, and since we were going to move the field events to the northeast corner, it actually works out well for us. What that does, though, with the D being empty, is that track kids could practice at the same time as there's a net there, so they could practice at the same time as lacrosse kids, and there's a lot goes on in our fields. It's very hard to schedule. The safety nets were in our bids, but I'm sorry I'm getting into detail, but I do want to make sure you hear it all. The fencing, we're going to contact ourselves with AH Fence in Milton, who's done our work before. So in our bid spec, we said fencing would be gone, and both contractors interpreted that the safety nets would be gone. But you absolutely need to put those in, sync them in with the field. So that's an add. And we're looking to see if we can reduce that price with a different design. So, and then finally, and we think this is a pretty good, the odds are pretty good of this, that the top layer of track is shot, but the asphalt below seems to be in great shape. We've done some tests. We won't really know until they take the track off, the top level. But if it's in good shape, it will reduce the amount of paving that we have to do preliminarily, and that would be $52,900. The other contractor had $53,000, so they both knew that I think it's solid savings. So, now we won't know that till June or July. So, at any rate, these are the steps of what they've proposed. So the recommendation is to accept the progress amount of $889,145, and we'll build these other changes in as they go.
And what was the budget?
$919,000. That's why I'd be grateful if
I'm
that
sorry, I saw that.
$52,000 was not there.
Yeah.
I do want to say one thing for Stephen Bach, who's an engineer on this. He's a parent of kids who've gone through this district. Civil Engineering Associates has done 5 projects for us. And I would say that they saved Orchard School last year with our recommended, the drainage. So maybe this is a good time to say it, because I'm thankful of his work, his expertise, and his working with these contractors and subcontractors he's got. He has a way with them, I just want to say, so.
Great.
I'll move that we approve the bid.
Second motion.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Accounts payable, orders 41, 42, and 43. Any questions on those? Hearing none. Accounts payable orders check the Belkate School and the Howard Center. Any questions on those? And if not, do I have a motion?
Is Belkate relatively new? I'm just trying to
No.
remember.
No.
We've seen it, okay.
They're part of
The amount's new.
Yeah, the amount,
Yeah.
maybe that's what.
Yeah.
It's another one of the therapeutic places.
One thing I did want to say, it's in one of those notes, is Elizabeth asked last time for an update on our contracts. and we'll have that for the next meeting. It's, especially with what we're hearing about special education, we never used to get as many of these outside service bills as we have, the amounts, I mean.
Is this some of the new stuff that Joanne was talking about, or?
Absolutely referring to some of those. I don't want to say that it's all 8, but definitely it's been part of our concerning numbers. Yeah. Our need, I should say, not concerning, our needs.
Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the checks to Belkate School and the Howard Center.
Second? Anyone? No one wants to second that motion?
I'll second that motion.
That was difficult.
Don't know what the reluctance was over there.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed. A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yeah, that was fast. Look at that. Now we're all seconding. Any discussion on that one? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks for
Any
joining us,
opposed?
Tim.